Hello everyone, I hope you're all having a great day today. Now, as you might know, if you're a fan of DC or just comics in general, you're probably aware that there's a new cinematic universe coming out for DC, and it just seems like they're going to be trying to make sure the universe is good quality with all the different films and series connecting to each other in a pretty good way, and anything that's not part of that main timeline will be labeled as Elseworlds. But the question that this really comes down to is this a good thing? Is this the best for DC movies? To answer that question, we first have to look back at the DCEU and see if that was worth losing or not. And that's a little tough to assess because there were some films in the DCEU that I thought were really good, some of the best comic book films of all time, and I'm particularly talking about Zack Snyder's trilogy. And there were just some other films in there that I thought were pretty good. Well, obviously, not everything being great. But as a universe, as a whole, I don't think it did the best job of building up to that much stuff. The only really team-up crossover thing was kind of in Batman v Superman and the Justice League movie. There's still just a ton of stuff they were setting up, like with Black Adam and Superman, for the future that just never happened because of the cancellation of this universe. And I do have another video talking about how the DCEU failed that you can check out on my channel if you want to go into more detail with that. But just in general, when it comes to the DCEU, I don't think every single thing in it is terrible like a lot of people make it out to be. I think there's some very good movies in it. But just as a connected universe, it didn't really do it as well as like Marvel did in the Infinity Saga. And while there were many different elements that kind of caused the downfall of the DCEU, the biggest one, to just kind of generalize it, I would say, is studio interference. And so the big difference between the DCEU and the DCU is that you have James Gunn as the co-CEO of DC Studios kind of overseeing everything that's going to be going on. And I think that's actually a really good idea. And it's not like James Gunn is the boss of everything. It's not like he's not working with other people. There's of course other people in high positions, and that's always good because you want people to work together. You can't just have one person do everything. But it just seems like there's going to be more of a better plan. And also a key difference between the DCEU and the DCU is that the DCEU kind of tried to do what the MCU was doing by kind of building up to these different team-up movies, which the DCEU didn't do a tremendous job at. Whereas the DCU is actually going to be something more like Star Wars, where there's these different projects taking place in these different time periods. It's all on the same timeline, and it's all in the same universe, but it's not going to be something where they're immediately building up to these different team-up movies. It's just going to be a lot of different separate stories that don't all necessarily connect to each other, but they are in the same universe, if that makes sense. And as I said before, I really do like Zack Snyder, and I just thought he did a good job of making his films seem like comic books come to life while still feeling realistic and being able to take themselves very seriously. And so preferably I would have liked if he was one of the CEOs and maybe Christopher Nolan was another one. But regardless, the fact that we do have people in those positions is good enough for me. And while I don't necessarily prefer James Gunn over Zack Snyder's just in general when it comes to comic book movies, I still think he understands it all and it'll be good enough. Obviously, we had the trailer come out recently for the Superman movie and it seems about right. Whenever I look at comic book movies, I look at it from a perspective as someone who likes comics. And the trailer for the new Superman movie actually kind of reminded me of some of the stories from Action Comics number 1000, which is just completely random, but that's kind of what came to mind. It just seems like a good modernization of Superman. Visually, it's very good, and it's kind of interesting because there's a few different ways to do visuals because it's very different from the way Zack Snyder's films look, but I still really like how his films look. They're very good, but in a different way. And Zack Snyder's films themselves kind of remind me of some of the Superman comics from the 90s and that kind of stuff. I think just generally when it comes to comic book characters, a lot of them have kind of changed a little bit over the years. Just certain qualities of them, like Batman, Superman, the Joker. Don't get me wrong, they're definitely not open for interpretation, but I think when you adapt those kinds of characters into movies, there is a little bit of flexibility in what the vibe of them can kind of be like. So just overall, I'm pretty excited to see what we're going to get in the new DCU with the new Superman movie coming out this year. And then next year, we're going to get the Supergirl movie, the Clayface movie, and at some point, we're getting the Brave and Bold film, unless maybe it turns out that Robert Pattinson's Batman is the DCU Batman, because even though they're acting like that's not the case, with all the delays for the Batman Part 2, I think there is a possibility they're still considering that. But who knows, we actually did get our first look at the DCU Batman in animated form, and it does look like a different Batman from Robert Pattinson, but maybe it's just a different suit, and maybe Robert Pattinson's Batman movies, if it does end up being part of the DCU, maybe they're supposed to take place way before the Superman movie does on the timeline, so that later on in the timeline, Robert Pattinson's Batman is the older Batman, that they're trying to make it seem like that's what it's going to be because of the Bat family. But who knows? Let me know if you're excited for the DCU in the comments section down below. Well, obviously it did kind of already kick off with Creature Commandos, so it is technically already out. And while I do miss a lot of the actors from the DCEU, maybe we'll see them later on in a multiverse movie. But as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.